So I want to start pulling together some videos that have a look at the different questions on the A-level classical civilization exam and how to approach them. And I'm hoping that these videos will be useful to the students who are attempting to answer the questions, but also to the teachers who are delivering the specification. By no means am I promoting this as the expert view or the only way to go about these particular questions. I just thought it would be helpful to see how other people have approached them and taught them, and hopefully give you a little bit of food for thought. And I'm starting with the World of the Hero comparative 10 marker, comparing a passage from the Iliad or Odyssey with the Aeneid, which is an aspect that I think my students have found more challenging than other questions across the years. So these are some examples of question stems. You can get asked which passage is more engaging, which passage is better at creating tension or evoking sympathy, and sometimes they can take a little bit more of a thematic approach, for example, which is better at demonstrating the values of society at the time. Now, some students are naturally very good at comparing two passages and finding their own ideas. However, I've found that it works really well to support all students to have some ready-made comparisons that they can look out for. So, for example, you can see on the screen, is there a simile in one passage but not the other one? So we're going to get a more in-depth description that is made more relatable to the audience in one particular passage. Is one passage a flashback and the other one in present moment? They can argue this one of two ways. If it's a flashback and it's coming from the Odyssey, we might already know Odysseus is safe and it might decrease the tension. And the Aeneid might be happening in the present moment. We're still waiting to see what happens. Equally, we could perhaps argue that there is some engagement from a flashback because Odysseus, spinner of tales, we're not even sure whether or not he's telling the truth. We can look at whether passages are first or third person, more immediately engaging the audience with the action. We can look at speed of engagement. Does one passage immediately grab your attention whilst the other builds tension over time? And of course you can argue that one either way. Is one passage about a major character in which we are very invested versus a minor character in the other passage? You can think about the relevance to the audience. So which one would include references or context that were going to be more meaningful? So for example, if we have, say, for example, the death of a young man in the Aeneid passage, that's going to be very, very relevant to the audience who've experienced decades of civil war, but also the succession crisis of Augustus and the death of young Marcellus. We can have a look at pathos if it's a more open question about engagement. Divine intervention, are the gods present in one, kind of making things happen? And of course, these are the very gods that the audience worship themselves, so that would make it even more engaging. And perhaps is one passage more thought-provoking than the other? So, for example, do we get a scene about the afterlife, or what happens to souls after death, a philosophical moment in Aeneid Book 6? So I have these as a checklist for students to compare the two passages with and to see if they can find any of these techniques. And then once I've done this, we look for mnemonics. Obviously, the quirkier, the stranger, the ruder, the better, so that they can remember that checklist when they're in the exam and to go through it kind of systematically. Right, is there divine intervention in one passage but not another? Once we've done this, I also have a look at how to structure their arguments in a comparative way in the question as well. So I remind them there's no need for an introduction because this is a commentary, it's not an essay. To separate out each argument as a new paragraph or mini paragraph so that the examiner can find each of their points clearly and see that they've made a range of different points as well. To carry on using point, evidence, explain as the structure. So the point goes straight to the heart of the question. The Odyssey passage is better at creating tension due to, and it could be the speed at which it engages the listener. And you mentioned one of the techniques from the checklist in that opening sentence. Then you put your evidence in. Remember, you need to quote directly from the passage to support that point. But the heart of this question is why one passage is more successful than the other. So our explain has to include a comparison to the other passage, a direct one. So if you're talking about, for example, the speed of engagement, you perhaps then need to, in your explain part, talk about how the other one is slower to build up, and bring quotes in from that other passage as well, because it's really important that you show that you have used both passages throughout your answer. And then, of course, practice makes perfect. So have as many goes as you can of comparing two passages, using that checklist, using the structure, and under those timed conditions. And we're approximately 12 minutes on the exam, so that's not very long, which is why I feel the checklist really helps. So I hope you have found that useful, and I am planning to put together some other videos for the other different types of questions and also how we approach scholarship, just hoping that it will help everybody out there. Thank you.